And the divide spills over from the issue, from the concept of the role of the federal government into the private lives, private morality of people. And this is because of something called judicial activism. The Supreme Court during the 1960s was what they call an activist court, okay? Judicial activism is the idea that, well, first off, let me just ask you guys, what is the purpose of the federal court? What is the purpose of the judicial branch?
To interpret the laws.
To interpret the, right, okay. So when you say interpret, what does that mean? What would be a valid law?
Well, like the right to bear arms right now, that's constantly under interpretation.
Okay, that's what they're arguing about, but what would make the law valid?
Unconstitutional or
if it's constitutional or not, yeah.
If it's constitutional or not, right? What what an activist court does is it broadens the definition of what's constitutional by saying, well, it's constitutional, even though it doesn't exactly say in the Constitution this, we can understand it to mean this because of that, right? And so there's going to be a disconnect then between people who see the Constitution as something that should be interpreted strictly, and those who see the Constitution as something that can be interpreted more broadly, right? This is a long time controversy in American constitutional law, going all the way back to the beginning. Is the Constitution, they have what they call strict and loose constructionist, right? A strict constructionist is somebody who says that the federal government should only be able to do what the Constitution says, and the Constitution only says what it says. And a loose constructionist will say, well, the Constitution grants for different interpretations because of the necessary and proper clause. And so therefore we can broaden the meaning of the Constitution based on current needs, right? So those are the two different kind of constitutional strategies or our outlooks. And in today's court, for example, most of the justices are strict constructionists. The more conservative justices would be the strict constructionists, and the more liberal justices would be the loose constructionists, right? Just so we can kind of leave it there. Okay, so, but what happens is that during the 1960s, the court was more dominated by loose constructionists, which meant that they interpreted the Constitution more broadly. All right. And so in a couple of different cases, I can give you an example. They make decisions that look like they're actually making law, right? They call it legislating from the bench. Okay. Rather than just interpreting the law, they're actually making law. That's what people say. And generally, the court will be accused of making law whenever they make a decision that goes against what you believe, right? So if you think that the court should decide one way and they actually decide a different way, then you'll say, well, they're just legislating from the bench, right? But if you agree with them, then you say, well, that's a valid interpretation. You guys get what I'm saying? So when we say that a court is an activist court or that they're legislating from the bench, you have to understand that that's really point of view. Okay. At any rate, the point here, I can give you a couple of examples. One has to do with criminal rights, and that's the Miranda case, Miranda versus Arizona, right? Where a man named Miranda was actually convicted of a crime. He confessed to the crime, but because he wasn't told that he could have a lawyer before he confessed, they appealed it through to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said they had to overturn the conviction because he wasn't told about his rights, which is what leads to what we call the Miranda rights. So if you guys ever watch cop shows or hopefully not, but if you've ever been arrested, right, you'll hear the cops always say you have the right to be silent, you have the right to attorney, that sort of thing, right? Okay, so that's going to be one example. Then there's other examples that go into social issues. One of them actually ends up being a First Amendment case that was a porn shop owner that was told he couldn't open a porn shop in a certain location, and he argued, he appealed that through the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court said that the First Amendment said he could have the shop, right? And then there were other ones like laws that prevented interracial marriage between blacks and whites, where those cases were challenged all the way up through the courts, and the courts eventually said that there was that it was unconstitutional to prevent interracial marriage. And then there was another one where they used to actually, when I was in school, every morning there would be a prayer. Somebody would lead a prayer over the intercom, right? And there was somebody who sued saying that they didn't want to be led in a prayer, and that went all the way to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said that the school can't lead people in prayer. Okay, it doesn't say you can't have prayer in school. Everybody knows there's prayer in school whenever test time comes along, right? But it says that the school can't lead you in that prayer because the school is a government entity, right? Okay, so for example, if I was a professor, I'm not going to do this, but if I was a professor and I tried to lead you guys in a prayer, that would be unconstitutional because Mesa College is a government entity. But if I was a professor at USD, which is a Catholic college, and I said I was going to lead you in a prayer, I could do it because it's not a government entity. You guys get what I'm saying? Questions, comments about that? All right, okay, so at any rate, now let's take a look at this from the point of view of the liberals. We'll say, okay, well, the liberals say, you have to be informed of your rights. The liberals say you have a right to say pretty much whatever you want. The liberals say you can marry whoever you want, and the liberals say you have to keep your private religion out of the school. The state shouldn't be teaching religion or practicing religion, okay? But from the conservative point of view, what we're seeing is that the court is overturning convictions on a technicality, right? Technicality meaning that they didn't read him his rights, okay? And the court is acting in favor of pornographers and atheists, and these actions are seen as a real challenge to the traditional way of what does it mean to be an American. You follow what I'm saying? So this is the divide. This is the divide between the liberals and the conservatives, and this is not a divide that can be bridged. There's no common ground here. You follow what I'm saying? This makes sense to you guys? All right. So that's how we end up with this divided country between liberal and conservative.